You ever had that problem? Oh, no. It just told me an error occurred, and I have no idea if we're actually live. Last time it did that, it just booted me. I had to completely restart the damn thing. So instead of doing the usual talking like I do, we're going to verify that we're actually live unless somebody in comments can poke something in there and tell me that I am actually live, because otherwise I'm going to check. And of course, everything's going to be slow as crap. According to this, we are not live. That's not good. I bet we're live in a bunch of places, but not in Okay, is it actually working? Cool. Well, then we'll just roll over into the next part.
3, 2, 1.
And here we go.
On my own, here we go.
If you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror.
The communists declared that the real differences among our people constituted the weakest and most vulnerable point in our social fabric.
It's MAGA country.
This is no hoax, ladies and gentlemen. I urge you to run for your lives while you can. We're not making this up just so we can take over the world.
The old dinosaur media isn't dying, it's dead. We are the new media. This is our world now. Lay down and die.
Peace was never an option.
So if we don't step up and win this culture war, then who the fuck will?
Let's wake the fuck up! We're gonna get naked.
No. I'm locked in here with you.
You're locked in here with me.
That's what you've been waiting for. Be the one we need.
Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Global industrial complex.
Yep. Uniparty.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
The point is to destroy Western civilization from within using Maoist technique. So therefore you have to vote for me.
I don't know. This is probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Hey.
Woke is Marxism, evolved to attack the West.
Hey!
Stop giving up.
It's only just begun! Now!
Do it! Yes, you can!
I'm gonna do what's called a pro-gamer move.
Just do it!
Are people bitching about that?
Some people.
Of course they are. Oh, fucking A. All right, got it. Yeah, too fucking bad.
All right.
Yeah.
Any far left conspiracies, to be honest with you.
Ain't no single entity going to swoop in and save the day. You are going to be continuously let down if you place all of your hope into one individual. Instead, look inside and look around. We're doing this together.
We all are fighting for the same thing, and we all see the same problem.
It's time to stop being an NPC, get off your ass, and join the meme war.
Shame! Shame!
No, I don't like you.
Shame!
If we were in the wild, I would attack you.
I'm sick of it, man. I'm fucking sick of it. I will not do it again.
Thank you. I wonder how many people feel exactly the same way.
Yeah.
Be the beating drum at the head of the growing creative cavalry charge. Be vocal and profound in your passion for projects you enjoy.
No more excuses.
I've seen it. I can't even compute all of it. It's so fantastical. You've not seen nothing. You ain't heard nothing. You ain't smelled nothing like this. I don't have words to tell you.
A new world order.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make. Hey, wait a minute.
You control population, you destroy the family, and then you you sow division.
You don't need a destination when you're running on an omnidirectional treadmill.
Are we ready for a new world order?
You'll never defeat the human spirit. You'll never defeat God. You'll never win. Pray that he is watching.
Against all the evil that hell can conjure, all the wickedness that mankind can produce, we send unto them only you.
On my own, here we go.
I'll do it myself.
Oh dear, am I up already?
Yeah, my bad.
Rise out the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the water is 5 feet high and rising, and the storm drains are clogged with syringes and hobo poop. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Here is your Decline of Western Civilization news roundup for the third week of January 2024. Dateline Orlando, Monday, 15 January. In a shocking repudiation of everything the wokesters hold dear, a 22-year-old smoking hot blonde Air Force pilot who was born female and everything has won this year's Miss America title. Second Lieutenant Madison Marsh, originally from Fort Smith, Arkansas, currently fighting out of Colorado Springs, who graduated last year from the Air Force Academy and is currently in pilot training, learning how to liquidate America's enemies with extreme prejudice and professional precision, becomes the very first active duty service member to win the nation's most coveted beauty pageant. Reached for comment. Every whining woke moron on Twitter stated, quote, wait, what? That's not how this is supposed to work. Do we really want to live in a world where gorgeous, accomplished, highly skilled women win all the beauty pageant titles? Do you even know the kind of disproportionate impact that might have on women and communities of color? And what kind of message does that send for body positivity? That the best way to win beauty pageants is by having a pretty face and nice, silky, smooth hair and legs so long they enter the room 5 minutes before you do, and a perfectly well-proportioned ass you could bounce a quarter into orbit off of, and a pair of nice, firm, pert, supple breasts that could make an atheist believe in God Almighty? We here at Body Positivity Twitter simply won't stand for that sort of monstrous bigotry, and we encourage all of our followers to protest by eating a box of donuts and never exercising again, end quote. Dateline Washington, Tuesday, 16 January. White House Press Secretary Baghdad Buckwheat issued a series of lies during her Tuesday briefing this week that, even by her own extremely lofty standards, was really quite a thing to behold. She first claimed, in contravention of literally all the known facts, that personnel from the Texas Military Department had interfered with U.S. Border Patrol agents last week as they attempted to rescue a family of illegal aliens from drowning in the Rio Grande. Which, yeah, don't you have such an easy time picturing that as I do? Brave, selfless Border Patrol agents lunging for the water, trying to save drowning children, only to be physically restrained and held back by evil, awful, mustache-twirling Texan movie villains who just want to watch brown people die. Because I am sure it went down pretty much exactly like that. Then she said, once again, operating under the principle that a lie becomes true if you just repeat it a sufficient number of times, that police officers were killed by Trump supporters at the Capitol on 6 January 2021. Reached for comment, Ashley Babbitt stated, oh wait, she didn't state anything because she's dead. Shot in cold blood by a trigger-happy cop firing from a concealed position without identifying himself, who murdered an unarmed citizen and faced no consequences whatsoever. And she is still, no matter how often and how fervently any dirty lying-ass liars like Baghdad Buckwheat lie about it, the only person who was killed at the Capitol on 6 January 2021. Dateline Davos, Switzerland, Wednesday, 17 January. Argentinian President Javier Milei, who, for this reporter's money, is just about as awesome as politicians get, went directly into the nest of vipers known as the World Economic Forum this week, and he basically told those assholes in no uncertain terms what we all think of them. Quote, I am here today to tell you that the West is in danger. It is in danger because those who are supposed to uphold the values of the West find themselves co-opted by a worldview that inexorably leads to socialism and consequently to poverty, end quote. Quote, we are here to tell you that collectivist experiments are never the solution to the problems that afflict the citizens of the world, but on the contrary, they are their cause, end quote. Quote, The problem is that social justice is not only not fair, but also does not contribute to the general welfare. On the contrary, it is an intrinsically unjust idea because it is violent. It is unjust because the state is financed by taxes and taxes are levied coercively. Or can any of us choose not to pay taxes? Which means that the state is financed through coercion, and the greater the tax burden, the greater the coercion. End quote. And frankly, I can't think of anything to add to this speech except a pair of cartoon sunglasses and a big, thunderous mic drop. Bien jugado, señor presidente. Bien jugado, por cierto. Dateline Houston, Thursday, 18 January. From the what could we possibly do to even make bigger fools of ourselves desk comes the following. NBC Sports caused a firestorm of viewer indignation this week when they, for reasons that are their own and the rest of us can only guess at, made the bold editorial decision to edit Jesus Christ out of a post-game interview with Houston Texans quarterback C.J. Stroud, following his team's 45-14 win over the Cleveland Browns in the NFL wildcard playoffs last weekend. If you were watching the live telecast of the post-game show, here is the quote you heard from Mr. Stroud. Quote, "First of all, I just want to give all glory and praise to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I mean, it's been amazing being in this city for as short as I've been, but the love that I've got, I've really just been doing it for Houston, man. The people back home, I'm blessed enough to be in the position that I'm in and blessed enough to be playing at a high level right now. We just got to keep it going, but I am super blessed," end quote. Now, there's nothing here that should be remotely controversial to any sane person, right? Well, don't try telling that to NBC Sports, because if you went to their website the following morning wanting to watch that same interview, well, you'd hear the same quote, just without that Jesus-y bit on the front end. They kept the reporter asking the question, then they just sort of jump cut it right to that second sentence. A real triumph of censorious subtlety, in the opinion of this reporter. Dateline Tallahassee, Friday, 19 January. And the least surprising development since we found out Darth Sidious was really Chancellor Palpatine, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis developed the ability to read the writing on the wall this week and announced that he is getting out of the Republican presidential race because it was always a fool's errand thinking he had any chance of beating Donald Trump. Well, he didn't actually say that last part. That's just what the rest of us are all thinking. And there's a valuable object lesson here, I think, for all politicians who dream of electoral upward mobility, as they all do, or else they wouldn't be politicians. Ron DeSantis was taken in by people who didn't necessarily have the best interests of his long-term political future in mind. He allowed a lot of people to blow a lot of smoke up his ass. It's now or never, Ron. It's your moment, baby. You got to strike while the iron's hot. Now or never. Did these people really think any of that stuff? Of course they didn't. They were people who needed campaign jobs who had already been turned down by Trump, and they didn't want to work for some douchebag like Chris Christie or Nikki Haley. They figured a DeSantis run would give them the best chance of staying employed for the longest amount of time. And now, in all likelihood, Governor DeSantis has pissed away his entire political future before his 46th birthday, when all he had to do was nothing. Just keep being America's best governor and don't run for president when it is obviously somebody else's year. It's a shame to see a man with a promising future step on a rake while shooting himself in the balls this way, but in the final analysis, I suppose it just is what it is. And so ends your Decline of Western Civilization News Roundup for this, the third week of January 2024. And with that, we send it over to my illustrious colleague, the Rudolph Valentino of large furry hominids, your friend and mine, the inimitable, the one and only, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
January 6th has become a fart in the wind. The only people paying for that trash are little old ladies who took pictures of themselves while walking in between the velvet ropes. Furthermore, the only person who actually seems to have committed a crime that day was a Fed. And if he wasn't a Fed, he was really trying to be a Fed. And if you don't like that, screw you. Now, let's do this correctly. Let's get you in the right spot because it always changes it. There we go. How you doing, bud? You have a good week?
A very pleasant good evening to you, sir. Yes, I did. How was yours?
Could have been better. Could have been worse. It didn't freeze here. Not like that.
Yeah, we're having a bit of a rainstorm here last couple of days. An atmospheric river, I think they call it.
That's better than 18 foot of snow, I guess.
Yeah,
so there's
that we do not have to worry about. I just hope the vagrants don't get wet and the illegal aliens. That's what really matters.
Yeah, we're all concerned about the illegal aliens.
As well we should be.
And the fact that my chair keeps losing air and I get shorter. So you have a couple of topics. I have a couple of topics. We're going to start with yours because that's how these things tend to work. So what's your specific point this week?
Well, I was planning on doing a regular episode on Thursday before I had a song that wrote itself and needed to be recorded. So that's how that went. So I figured I would just keep the topic and use it for the Sunday show. And the topic, which it's not the direct anniversary anymore today, but it's just as well, is that this week, 18 January specifically, is the 113th anniversary of the first time a crazy son of a bitch ever tried to land an airplane on a freaking ship. Right. And it worked, and he didn't die. And you know, if you're the average American with the average general knowledge level, you probably are not familiar with the name Eugene Burton Eli, but you know, all things being equal, maybe you should be. Maybe this is a man who should have his name spoken in the same breath as your Lindberghs and your Wright brothers and so on. Because if we are placing the greatest importance in the first guy who accomplished a thing, then this young man absolutely has to be spoken in that same breath, because he wasn't just the first crazy son of a bitch to land an airplane on a ship. He was also the first crazy son of a bitch to take off from a ship, which he actually did in just a few months before he accomplished the feat of landing on USS Pennsylvania in a 60 horsepower Curtis Pusher D1, I believe it was called. It's basically, think of a middle of the road riding lawnmower, and that's about how much engine power this airplane had. And it's not correct to say he was landing on an aircraft carrier either, because there is no such thing as an aircraft carrier at this point. The Navy is trying to figure out if there exists some means whereby aircraft can be launched and land on ships. Otherwise, they don't really see any point of establishing a naval aviation arm, which seems rather quaint to us today, since now we have naval air stations that are 500 miles from any body of water. But anyway, what they actually did in this case was USS Pennsylvania, which is a late 19th century vintage armored cruiser. They just built a plywood deck on the thing and tried to figure out maybe how much roll space an aircraft would need to take off and potentially land. And Eugene Eli was the guy who stepped up and said, I value my life not at all. I will attempt this thing. And of course, I think the guy probably would be vastly more famous today if he hadn't been killed within mere months of the two things that he was noteworthy for having done. But you know, when you never see your 25th birthday, you don't have very much of a chance to write your own legacy, I don't think.
Well, I just want to point out that so a bunch of guys basically pulled a redneck afternoon. One of them was kind of drunk. The other one was really, really drunk. And he said, hey, man, I bet you I can get that plane off the deck. We make that deck long enough. And little Bo Jameson over there said, well, hell, man, I got me a bunch of wood over here. We'd probably make it another 30 foot longer. That wouldn't be never too much problem. A couple of carpenters would get it over there, bang it up together. Be no problem. He goes, here's the question. Can you land on it? How long
because that's they had already kind of figured out by this point that you could you could launch a plane off the quarterdeck of a ship with a steam catapult,
right,
and give it enough momentum to stay airborne. But the next big frontier was, can you take off an airplane under its own power off the deck of a ship without any assistance? And that was the thing that Eli first did. And it was Pennsylvania he did the first landing on, and it was USS Birmingham was the one he took off from. That was 14 November 1910, flying a Curtiss Pusher again, a temporary platform erected over the bow of Birmingham, USS Birmingham, which is a light cruiser, and just barely got airborne. He actually dipped the wheels in the water before he. I think this was actually at such an early date that they hadn't even figured out yet that you need to turn the ship into the wind when you're taking off your aircraft.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point right there.
Yeah, that's the state of experimentation we're still in.
Absolutely. It's deep, dude. You have to really think this crap through. This guy took 64 horsepower and 697 some odd pounds of balsa wood and pusher freaking propeller and flew straight at the bow of a ship flying that was sailing in a random freaking direction as far as the wind is concerned, and pegged the landing, a landing that had never been even attempted previously.
Yeah. So it's not like you can give him a set of procedures to follow. Just go ahead and make the attempt, son. We hope you live.
We have no guy on the deck with the little lights showing you where you're at. There's no kind of distance measuring. The only thing you can do is grab your big brass balls, hope for the best, and do what you can.
And the absolute most improbable thing in this story is that the very first time a guy tried to land an airplane on a ship, he succeeded, and he lived and walked away.
Exactly. That by itself, that simple fact. And I want to go one step further. You have to remember, this was in a time period when the airplanes were not sufficiently advanced to actually accomplish this feat. Not really. The experience was completely lacking in the field of aviation to do anything remotely resembling this. The experience in the aviation on waves and boats were completely lost. There's nothing there. This guy is literally writing the book as he's about to crash into the nose of the ship.
Yeah, and this is about 7 or 8 years removed from the Wright brothers' very first flight at Kitty Hawk, and nobody has even figured out very well how to land and take off airplanes from the ground, much less from a stinking ship. Right?
Oh my Lord! Just the
and as you mentioned, and it bears repeating, the aircraft at this stage of the game, they quite literally are a bit of balsa wood and a bit of sailcloth and some wires and a lawnmower engine
and a little bit of gas.
Yep. And he plunges this thing off the edge of a cruiser and has the confidence in himself that he can get it airborne when nobody has ever attempted such a foolish stunt in all of human history. And for those types of reasons, I think the young man deserves to have his name mentioned in the same breath as our other titans of aviation pioneering history, I think.
Yeah, you also have to consider that this was probably one of the greatest hold my beer moments in the history of the United States.
Yeah. Well, and also for those fans keeping score at home, if you're wondering how they planned on stopping the airplane if and when it landed successfully on the deck, well, he did have a tail hook, but it's probably not as fancy as you're thinking of. With there was no steel cable and no double arresting gear at work here. He had a tail hook affixed to the back of his aircraft, and on the deck you had, not making this up, you had half a dozen lengths of rope with sandbags on each end. And then it was hoped by the people who devised this system that somehow the tail hook would catch one of these ropes and the sandbags would slow the thing down. And also, you have to think that still these early aircraft, they are so light that you need guys on the deck to hold the thing doing while the pilot gets out, because with the deck's pitching up and down, if you get a stiff wind that kicks up, this thing might get blown into the air like a kite, because that's basically what it is.
This is what we're looking at here, right?
Yep. There it is.
This is if that's not a hold my beer moment, I'm not from Georgia.
That is Eugene Eli pitching off the deck of USS Birmingham on 14 November 1910.
You know why he dipped so low on that first attempt?
Whew.
Clearly his balls was all the drag he needed.
Damn right. It was it's probably a similar feeling to the one that Jimmy Doolittle felt on the morning of the Doolittle raid, because he had less room for his takeoff roll than any of the other guys did, because he had the other 22 aircraft behind him. So he almost dipped his wheels in the water too on that takeoff.
I don't know where I read this, and it may be completely off base, but after all that was said and done, I think it was the second or third pilot in line commented that he had no idea how Doolittle got off without crashing, because by the time he had taken his turn, there wasn't enough wind speed when you first came off the deck, and he actually nosedived at the water to pick up the extra 3 miles an hour he needed. He said, "There's no way Doolittle got that thing off the deck. It's impossible. I have no idea how he did it." But he peed.
And even with every other variable going exactly right, you still had to time the pitching of the deck so that it was just right, so that you were on the upswing when you got your wheel to the end of the deck. And because imagine trying to do that whole series of calculations in your head.
Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody in the chat, and if you had, let me know, or maybe you ever played the original Nintendo version of Top Gun? You remember that, Jeff?
It seems like I should have, but it's not ringing a bell.
You may have played it, but you hated it, and so you threw it at somebody that you hated more or something.
That's possible.
No one hated that game, because one of the very first things you had to do was land on an aircraft carrier in order to get through the tutorial or whatever, so you could actually play the rest of the game. But the very last mission you do is, after running the mission, you have to do a particular landing that was done by a particular pilot in the movie, and it's not Tom Cruise. It's like his buddy from the previous. Is
it Cougar?
Something like that, yeah. But the thing is that the aircraft carrier is damaged, and you only have 1/3 of the runway or 2/3 of the runway that you can work with, which means only 1/3 of arrestor activity and absolutely no second gear on it. So dude, it took me probably 2 years to do this, and I had to accidentally almost do it to realize how to make it happen. In order to land on this thing, you have to pull every single braking device you own below the plane of the aircraft carrier and climb up into a ship that is approaching you. And because they're under wartime conditions, you only have 2 lights to work with, a red one and a amber one that is to determine your pitch and yaw or whatever.
Yeah.
I run that mission 10,000 times, and the day I accomplished it, I popped that game out, put it in a freaking envelope, and mailed it to a buddy of mine. I was like, I don't ever want to play that game again.
Yeah, I pulled up some screenshots, and I think it looks familiar now.
There's another one called Attack Sub 688. It was equally difficult, but we'll cover it on a submarine show.
Well, and go ahead.
I want to know, you see the picture on the screen now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So there was a period of time where aircraft were unconventional. And in that unconventional time period, they could have completely skipped the concept of an aircraft carrier and instead went with seaborne planes like this, converting a handful of cruisers over just to carry them into the location, put them off, let them take off, land, recover them, and leave. Right? That was kind of the other plan if the aircraft carrier didn't work.
Well, yeah, and the series of disadvantages with that is that, you know, you're really limited to biplanes and observation surveillance craft, and also when you launch and recover those things, the entire ship has to be devoted to the launching and recovery of the stupid little reconnaissance aircraft.
And it's completely fish in a barrel moments. You have no choice but to, and weather is a big issue, and there's so much you just can't do with that type of a system. Not saying that it's not useful. It's just that you lose a cruiser, probably two, because you'll need a tender cruiser to carry all the fuel, the men, the pilots, the living quarters, because a cruiser's a cruiser and it's got its own crew. You can't really, there's not much you can add to it to increase effectiveness. You would need an additional tender to handle all of the airplane stuff. Whereas in an aircraft carrier, all of that's taken care of by making a cruiser 3 times bigger and then giving it a flat top.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of times, especially during the Second World War, when a lot of the aircraft carriers originated their lives as cruiser hulls and then just had flight decks stapled on top of them due to the exigencies of war. I'm thinking specifically of the last few Japanese fleet carriers. One of them was Shinano, and the names of the other two escape me at the moment. But all three of them, you know, after Midway, we get 4 of our damn fleet carriers sunk, and I think these 3 carriers we've got in construction that we've just laid the hulls down on, I think those just became aircraft carriers now, because we need carriers more than we need cruisers, because we just got 4 of ours sent to the bottom.
Right. Well, on top of that, you've got the fact that the Battle of Midway was more negative for Japan than most people realize. They don't realize in most history classes, they don't teach the methods by which these ships were crewed. The admirals of these things had direct choice of who they wanted, and they got the absolute best they could get, which meant after the Battle of Midway, your best pilots, your best ship's crew, your best men are gone. You're now dealing with second string.
Yes, and now you also have to grapple with the fact that maybe we should develop some better damage control procedures.
That's another thing. They never did really attempt to recover from the damages that they sustained. They did nothing more than try to stem the flood.
Yep.
That's it. Not that
they had a real problem with you know, self-evaluation of their own tactical doctrines and you know, acknowledging when a thing might be wrong and a policy might need to be changed, and they just never figured out a way to be adaptable in the same way that we did, and in the same way that you need to be if you want to win a war like that.
Well, they didn't experience a Pearl Harbor. I think
they did not.
Had a lot to do with America's ability to adapt to an unfortunate situation. And another thing, a lot of people want to talk about the disaster that Pearl Harbor was. And yes, we did lose an awful lot of damn fine men that day. It's true. Some of our very best, but it was very different from the losses that Japan took on Midway. That whole Marianas turkey shoot bit, boy, howdy.
Oh yeah, I mean, if we are talking just in terms of cold, heartless military expediency, it was preferable for us to lose every vessel we lost in the Pearl Harbor attack rather than any of our fleet carriers.
Right? No fleet carriers and none of the trained men to make those things work. Because if it, you know, just hypothetically, I'm just going to go off the reservation here for a second and say, what if they were having a exercise that day and all of our best pilots and some of our best tender captains were at that exercise, but not actually started yet. They're still in the harbor, and that ship gets popped during the meeting. You decapitate our entire action force, our ready action force, and we have to retrain people who have not been trained for those positions yet, or at least not properly trained for those positions yet. And these people had some experience in their roles. So that's impossible. You can't replace those people.
No. Not overnight, you can't.
You're looking at a 18-month turnaround to try to go from, hey, we don't have any carrier captains, because you can't take a cruiser captain and throw him in a carrier and expect him to be able to be functional, because there's so much more that a carrier has. Because first of all, the direction a carrier is traveling is secondary to the direction of takeoff.
Yeah, and we
matters.
And we've talked before about the ultimate irony of the Pearl Harbor attack, which is that in launching that attack and achieving it, they showed us the shape of the future, and that the shape of the future was not with big gun battleships. But they ultimately wound up destroying our vessels that were going to be irrelevant anyway, and showing us exactly why they were irrelevant.
Right. And the fact that the people in command at that point in time were capable of viewing that attack. All right, let's back up. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's look at it from Japan's view the day before the attack. On paper, this attack should completely wipe out our ability to respond in the Pacific, as far as they understand our tactics and methods.
Yeah. Because according to the naval doctrine that everyone still adheres to, your battleships are your capital ships. The aircraft carriers are not even thought of as capital ships still at this point.
Right. Most of them are completely unarmored. They're still sort of in a kind of quasi testing phase at this point. I mean, they've been constructed. They're functional. We can put airplanes in the air. We can retrieve them. This is all doable. But it's never been done in combat. It's never been applied to a large theater of war. And the idea that you're going to take this, what was essentially once a cruiser, and turn it into the most powerful superstructure of warfare the planet has ever witnessed is unthinkable. No one looks at this thing right here that you see on screen. Nobody looks at that and is afraid of it. That is an observational platform. It is here specifically to gain information on the enemy's positions and to radio that back to the necessary guns to take care of it.
Yep. And then when ships defend themselves, it is with big fucking guns.
Right? They call another ship to defend it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're screwed. But that's
and
not
every the case. And you know, in every navy of all the world's great powers in the 1930s, they spent that whole decade grappling with that question. And they had factions of, you had your battleship admirals and your carrier admirals, and they all wanted to kill each other because they each thought the other guy's philosophy was completely wrong, and the carrier guys were right, obviously. But it was still a hell of a controversy in a hell of a lot of countries.
Yeah, and it basically directly split our maritime capacity for warfare for about the first 3 encounters of the Pacific theater.
Yeah, and you wound up with a lot of really ultimately needless ship designs. Like, did we really need to build the Iowa class battleships when we were building 24 Essex class fleet carriers? I'm going to say hell to the no on that.
Yeah,
but there was still that last little bit of naval dick measuring and tradition that God damn it, we need big gun battleships, we need more of them.
Yeah, and that was the entrenched past. That was the boomer thought of the day. More battleships, bigger guns, more range.
Yeah. And it's silly when you get right down to it, when you think of the number of decades that you spent with the big gun battleship being, the kingpin of the world's navies, and how few battleship on battleship engagement there actually ever were in world history. Like, what is there, half a dozen?
Yeah, and most of them are so completely one-sided. It's basically a first shot wins.
Yeah, Jutland is really the only one that was in any way inconclusive.
Yeah, exactly. So you're stuck. Okay, so they call you up on a Tuesday, right? You're being pulled up. You're not going.
Yeah, look at that picture, man.
You're not going to a cruiser, bro. Come on out to
you are not going to a cruiser.
They show you this thing and go, "This is your new command."
I wonder why they call it a flat top.
Wait a second. What are we going to be dusting crops, sir? Exactly. What am I supposed to do with this? Well, we want you to take fighter aircraft out to the Pacific Theater, field them, sink enemy ships, and recover our fighter aircraft and our pilots.
And then what they quickly figured out with designs like this was there was no way to actually funnel the engine smoke in such a way that didn't just completely obscure the deck and make the job of the pilots all the more difficult than it needed to be.
I wonder how many people quit when they were told that. Sir, I don't think so. You got the wrong man.
Well, I mean, where do you get guys like Eugene Ely? I mean, well, son, we need to figure out if there's any practicality in us starting an aviation branch of our Navy. We just need to know if it's possible to take a fucking airplane and land it on a ship deck. And you want to try that for us? Who the fuck says yes to that question?
And here's the erector set they're going to give you to do it with.
Yep, there it is. Look at that.
Not exactly a purpose-built hull here, bud.
Look at that feat of engineering. Look at that Frankensteinian monstrosity.
As long as it works, I'm good with it. Let me tell you something my pops used to tell me.
God, how high must the center of gravity be on that thing?
Jesus, you know how much ballast they had in the bottom?
I was just going to say the same thing.
My pops used to tell me if it looks stupid and it works, then it's not stupid. As long as it works, you're good.
And then, but even still, you get. Go ahead.
As I said, is there about 500 tons of concrete below the waterline to keep the bottom down? Good Lord.
And even still, you get all the way into the thick of the Second World War, and there still is a pretty big design controversy in carriers between ourselves and the British, because they are armoring the shit out of their flight decks, and we are not. We're still going with wooden flight decks on the Essex class, and they think we are freaking insane for not armoring our flight decks. And we say, well, we want the added speed instead of the added weight. And if somebody punches a hole in our deck, it's just a matter of getting some wood and patching the fucking thing. So, you build them your way, we'll build them our way.
Yeah. And there's so many benefits that you don't immediately realize to a wooden deck over a armored deck. The weight is obvious. The center of gravity is obvious. The top speed is obvious. The fuel consumption, obvious. But when you drop a 500-pound bomb on a wooden deck, it doesn't detonate. It doesn't.
Right, and that's another thing that the British discovered, and much to their detriment, was that when you armor the flight deck and the hangar deck, so that it's all a nice tight thick armor box, if you punch a bomb through that, the force of the blast is going to be multiplied by the fact that it's being held in, whereas on an American, it would just get blown out the top of the wooden flight deck. But
it's kind of like the difference between sticking a firecracker under a tin can versus sticking a firecracker in a metal tube.
Yeah, it's under, or a firecracker blowing up in an open hand versus a closed hand. There's a lot of difference in the damage.
That's much, much better analogy. Thank you.
God, look at that rickety ass thing. That is terrifying.
and they still haven't figured out what to do with the smoke. They have no idea.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, that was one of the absolute biggest problems in early carrier design. Was how the hell to funnel the smoke away so that your pilots don't get their view obscured and kill themselves on landing.
that was eventually the real reason why they started turning into the wind, was for visibility, not because they thought it would help the airplane take off any better. But immediately upon starting to do that, two things became immediately obvious. One, it's way easier to take off straight into the wind, and the smoke goes straight back. It's not in the way of the pilot taking off. So visibility is no longer affected.
Yeah. And, you know, with those, especially on with these very early aircraft, like we're talking about, you know, 60 odd horsepower with a pusher propeller, you really do need that extra few knots of wind over the wings to even, you know, feel like you have a decent chance of getting airborne and maybe dipping your wheels in the water like our friend Mr. Eli did.
Right. Or Mr. Doolittle for that matter. Yeah. And he was hauling a little bit more weight than Mr. Eli was. Yeah. Dude. I mean, first of all, those airplanes were never fucking designed to take off on a fucking carrier. They were never supposed to be there. What were they, Liberty class bombers?
B-25s.
B-25s.
Yep.
Can't remember which one that's called.
The Mitchell.
Yeah, it was the Mitchell. That's right, the Mitchell bomber. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was actually, Doolittle had a hell of a time even selecting the aircraft he wanted to use. That was a several month-long process.
And it was a very involved process. He went to the various different aircraft designers, looked at the actual airframe of the aircraft, asked them how much that airframe alone weighed, and then marked that off his list as not a possibility.
And some of the finalists are planes that hardly anybody has heard of today, like the B-18 Bolo, I think, was one of the finalists. It might have been down to the B-18 and the B-25, as a matter of fact. But he had a very, very specific set of performance criteria that he needed to satisfy on this thing.
Right? And there's movies that depict all of the training and stuff. There's various ones you can go look at, and you can see the kind of stuff that they did. But one of my favorite bits, and this is, I think, depicted in I know it's depicted in the Doolittle movie, but he sees a man take off 8 foot over the line, and he goes, "That's not good enough. What's the best you can do?" "No, sir." He grabs a beer and walks out onto the line and stands there and says, "Sends the next one." "But sir, you're on the runway." "No, I'm not. I'm in the ocean. Send the next one." And this next pilot had a choice. He could run over one of the most famous pilots in the history of the world, or he could get this bitch off the ground.
Yeah, when we were in Northern California 2 years ago, we wound up at Nut Tree Airport in Vacaville, which was actually Jimmy Doolittle's home airport when he was just a young civil aviator. And so they've got a little museum there that has the coolest collection of Doolittle stuff I ever saw in my life. We actually wound up spending most of the day there, and I actually got to help some restoration guys pin the wings back on a 1930 little yellow Curtiss trainer, so that was fun too. But yeah, we wound up there quite by accident, but what a great collection. And I guess this was one of the airports where they actually there was a regular rotation of local airports where they would host the Doolittle Raider reunions. And this was one of the airports that it was in the rotation, because obviously it's Jimmy Doolittle's home airport. So what a memorabilia collection those guys have got there. Just incredible place to spend an afternoon and part of an evening if you're ever in Vacaville, California.
God forbid.
God forbid.
So I had the pleasure of going to see a Doolittle showing a exhibit at the Warner Robins Air Force Base up here. They've got a pretty good museum up there, and they just coincidentally, and at the time I had no idea what I was looking at, but I was wandering around out there in all the exhibits, and I come across what appeared to be an unfinished airplane. And remember, I have no idea who Doolittle is or what, none of this. And I was standing there staring at that airplane, and some dude comes walking by, and he's carrying a thing of freaking drinks, and he looks over at me. He says, "Oh, no, there's no engine in that one, kid. Go ahead. You can go climb around in it if you want to. Just be careful. There's a few sharp spots here and there." And I went over there and looked around and climbed around in it and found a sign inside that explained about the Doolittle raid. And I sat down in the cockpit with that sign and just read the whole thing out loud. And when I stood up to come out, I found 8 or 9 of the other students that had come up were just standing there looking at it. And they're like, "How could they fly this thing?" I said, "Well, apparently it's designed to take off from an aircraft carrier, but I don't see it." You couldn't pay me to try that shit.
I'm telling you right now, audience, if you're a Doolittle fan and you're, anywhere near the place, that little Nut Tree Airport Museum is worth your time.
And I want to be
clear, they don't even charge you to get into the place. I think we left a $5 donation on our way out.
It wasn't an actual Doolittle plane. It was a B-25 that had been outfitted in a very similar way to because we really, to this day, we don't know exactly what it was that he did. We have what was recorded, and then there was what the pilots did after the fact. Because they were told flat out, "No, you cannot remove this. No, you cannot remove that. That is a safety feature. You cannot remove it." And the pilots just threw it in the ocean. We don't need it. We're not landing.
Oh yeah, and we got to pretend to have guns. We'll go paint up some broomsticks.
Yeah, that was actually there. That was one of the things that I will never forget, standing there looking in that freaking belt gunner location where I'm like, why? Is it just made up for because all these other planes have, decommissioned guns in them. This one, it's got a couple of broomsticks that look like you've been chewed up by moths. I don't understand.
And they didn't even have any gunners on board. They had fake guns, and nobody to pretend to fire them.
Right? Hell no, sir. No, sir. No, sir. No, sir.
When you get right down to it, I mean, we're accustomed to talking about that operation with 80 years of hindsight, knowing it was a success. But just think about how improbable it was. Not only that all 24 of those aircraft got off the deck of the Hornet, but that they all completed their attack runs. How fucking incredible is that?
They taught them 5 blinds in Chinese because, boys, you're not coming home. They planned this out with the intention of not returning.
Well, they were theoretically supposed to be able to land at certain fields in China, but they got detected by a Japanese picket boat and had to take off 700 miles before they wanted to. So that kind of blew that whole the original plan all to shit. At that point, it was hopefully we'll have enough fuel to make our attack run and then bail out over the Sea of Japan.
I don't know as to the veracity of this particular statement, but I've read after I got back from that tour of the Air Force Base, I became completely obsessed with the Pacific Theater and the shenanigans that went down over there. There was so much stopgap bullshit put into place that later became standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody knew what the hell they were doing. I mean, you could tell that by was the first landing at Iwo Jima where all the landing craft got stuck on the.
This probably gives us a good opening to talk some Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh yeah. No, we can do that. We can definitely do that. We're gonna go.
We both watched it this week.
Yep. All right. So, chat. Put a 1 in chat if you've seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge. Who's the main actor? I can't remember his name.
Andrew Garfield.
That's him.
Also starring Vince Vaughn, Sam Worthington, Hugo Weaving.
It might be Vince Vaughn's best non-comedic role. and it's funny as hell.
Yeah, and we were talking on email about how a lot of the casting calls in this movie were pretty bold on Mel Gibson's part as far as where these actors were at the time. And we were talking backstage. I can't remember if I did an actual review of this picture or was just talking about it in the context of something else. But Andrew Garfield in particular, you will remember that at this point in his career, he has just been fired from being the Amazing Spider-Man, because they had done Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man 2. They were supposed to make Amazing Spider-Man 3. And then Andrew Garfield got on the studio's bad side during some convention in Brazil. They called him up on short notice and said, we need you to come down here and hobnob with the studio execs and do some kind of a appearance in the spider suit. And he says, okay, whatever. Gets on the plane, goes down there. Like he got sick or something, or food poisoning or some shit, but he calls up and says, I don't feel so good, I'm not coming to the thing. And that very much pissed off the studio execs. As you might imagine, studio execs are people who generally like to get what they want. And he got fired from the Spider-Man gig, and that then sets in motion the whole series of events that winds up with Marvel Studios and Sony agreeing to share Spider-Man, and he makes his debut in the MCU in Captain America Civil War, played by Tom Holland. But, if not for that,
I gotta say this.
Go ahead.
I really like Tom Holland's role in Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, they hit it out of the park with that casting.
He did not have the quick wit retorts. He couldn't come back harder than, like, Spider-Man is renowned for dropping dry ass humor in the middle of a fight. It's just something that's part of the program. The first guy, I can't remember his damn name either. He's way
Tobey Maguire.
That cracker. Yes, he didn't have it at all. He had writers that did it well, and he was able to deliver the lines, but it came across as really forced to me. But then Toby, this new kid, he nailed it right out of the park, man. It was amazing. It was believable. It was reactable.
Well, it's believable because you should have an actual teenager playing Spider-Man and not a 28-year-old guy playing high school student, which is the biggest problem you have with Andrew Garfield. And it's not Andrew Garfield's fault. And just like it's not his fault that he's too good looking to play that role, but he is. The guy is just too beautiful to play a gawky, awkward teenager, because come on, every chick in the high school is going to want to jump on his dick.
That's true. And but when you transition him from the role of Spider-Man, a high school person who's having these high school problems, and as a superhero, into Hacksaw Ridge, where he is a conscientious objector who has accidentally killed his brother in his youth and decided that he will never carry a weapon again in his life. He goes to his CO, looks at him and says, "Sir, I will not touch a gun." He says, "You are in the United States Army and you are in a rifle company." "Yeah, and that's a mistake." "Well, it must be your mistake because the U.S. Army doesn't make mistakes."
And it was a real leap of faith by Mel Gibson to cast that guy at that particular moment in that role, because he's typecast as Spider-Man. And if this thing doesn't go well, it's, a lot of people are going to get laughed at for a good long time. And it could go wrong in much the same way with the casting of Vince Vaughn. You got to be really careful with that. And there's a part of that movie in the first part of the second act where it almost turns into a boot camp comedy.
Yeah,
and frankly, I thought they should have extended that part of the picture and cut down the part where we're actually in combat, because the whole second half of that picture we are in combat, and I thought they could have truncated that a little bit and shrunk the boot camp part, because I thought that part was the best part of the picture.
I'm not going to lie, Vince Vaughn's role in that, it's absolutely amazing. It's unbelievable. And he is capable of carrying a very, very, very serious role and introducing his personal comedic chops into it.
I
was looking at
and he has to do both of those things in this role. He has to be the comedic buffoon drill sergeant early on, and then he has to be, you know, dead serious guy in life and death combat in the third act, and he pulls it off admirably.
Even in the first half, he is deadly serious. Every single thing he says is an absolute bomb dropped on this company. He comes in, realizes that he's going to have to train this man, and without a gun. That line, what was it that dude said? Son, you have now earned the right to face the enemy with absolutely nothing to protect you.
Oh yeah, yep. It's a good line,
I guess.
Yeah.
And he delivers a line back that is actually quite beautiful. In a world that is trying to tear itself apart, is it so bad to want to put a little bit of it back together?
And also, go ahead.
Beautiful. At one point in time, when he's on top of Hacksaw Ridge and he's doing that mantra prayer, dear Lord, just give me the strength.
Just let me get one more.
One more. And he ends up getting tossed into a freaking Jap foxhole that actually is a tunnel. And while he's in there, he finds a wounded Japanese soldier. And just for lack of anything better to do, he treats him, drags his ass out, and tosses him off the cliff with the rest of his boys.
Yeah.
That was not an attempt to get information. That was not a intel drop. It was, but that wasn't his intent. His intent was to save a man's life.
Because, and he's on autopilot at that point. He's doing this stuff as a reflex action. He sees a wounded man. It's, you know, get the wounded man down the cliff. And that's probably something close to how it was for Desmond Doss in real life.
Right? Absolutely astounding. And I did a little bit of researching into it in the past week, not realizing we were going to have this conversation, but just because it interested me. And there were a few scenes in there that he was kind of unhappy about. And the interviewer asked him, is it because that it didn't happen that way? He's like, no, it happened just like that, but I was way dirtier.
Huh.
And the thing is, they couldn't put enough dirt on him to get him dirty enough. And this got to be like, no, dirtier. You don't understand, dirtier. I mean, when you take into account the fact that he didn't save a man, some people, they get a Medal of Honor for saving a man. They get a Medal of Honor for saving somebody that was, you know, not in direct line of fire or not directly under, but the person that gets the Medal of Honor was in danger, right? This location is in danger of being overrun. This individual stops it from happening. This is not the case with this gentleman. He was way past every reasonable reason to retreat. Had been ordered to do so and didn't. You just went mute, Bo. You just lost everything. I'm gonna stick you backstage. Let you. Oh,
sorry.
There you go.
But I thank you for mentioning the Medal of Honor because I want to read out that citation.
Oh yeah, here you go. Do that thing.
I don't have it yet.
Well, get that thing. What are we doing here? Are we not professionals? No, not really.
Give me 18 seconds.
18, 17, 16. All right. So y'all see this lovely piece of equipment this gentleman's wearing, this lovely accoutrement he has on. It is available on his channel. You can go have your very own one of these here shirts. You're not supposed to be showing it. You're supposed to be getting it. Don't get distracted. I know I'm beautiful.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, bud.
Man, this is an unusually long one, but that's fine. We like that. Private First Class Desmond T. Doss, United States Army Medical Detachment, 307th Infantry, 77th Infantry Division, near Urosoe Mura, Okinawa, Ryukyu Islands, 29 April, 21 May 1945. He was a company aide man when the 1st Battalion assaulted a jagged escarpment 400 feet high. As our troops gained the summit, a heavy concentration of artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire crashed into them, inflicting approximately 75 casualties and driving the others back. Private First Class Doss refused to seek cover and remained in the fire-swept area with the many stricken, carrying them one by one to the edge of the escarpment, and then lowering them on a rope-supported litter down the face of a cliff to friendly hands. On 2 May, he exposed himself to heavy rifle and mortar fire in rescuing a wounded man 200 yards forward of the lines on the same escarpment. And 2 days later, he treated 4 men who had been cut down while assaulting a strongly defended cave, advancing through a shower of grenades to within 8 yards of enemy forces in a cave's mouth, where he dressed his comrades' wounds before making 4 separate trips under fire to evacuate them to safety. On 5 May, he unhesitatingly braved enemy shelling and small arms fire to assist an artillery officer. He applied bandages, moved his patient to a spot that offered protection from small arms fire, and, while artillery and mortar shells fell close by, painstakingly administered plasma. Later that day, when an American was severely wounded by fire from a cave, Private First Class Doss crawled to him where he had fallen 25 feet from the enemy position, rendered aid, and carried him 100 yards to safety while continually exposed to enemy fire. On 21 May, in a night attack on high ground near Shuri, he remained in exposed territory while the rest of his company took cover, fearlessly risking the chance that he would be mistaken for an infiltrating Japanese and giving aid to the injured until he was himself seriously wounded in the legs by the explosion of a grenade. Rather than call another aid man from cover, he cared for his own injuries and waited 5 hours before litter bearers reached him and started carrying him to cover. The trio was caught in an enemy tank attack, and Private First Class Doss, seeing a more critically wounded man nearby, crawled off the litter and directed the bearers to give their first attention to the other man. Awaiting the litter bearer's return, he was again struck, this time suffering a compound fracture of one arm. With magnificent fortitude, he bound a rifle stock to his shattered arm as a splint and then crawled 300 yards over rough terrain to the aid station. Through his outstanding bravery and unflinching determination in the face of desperately dangerous conditions, Private First Class Doss saved the lives of many soldiers. His name became a symbol throughout the 77th Infantry Division for outstanding gallantry far above and beyond the call of duty. End quote. Harry S. Truman.
I want to point out some stuff about that. There's a lot of that that's not in the movie because the directors felt it was simply unbelievable.
Yep. And nothing they did put in is made up either.
Right? The only part that is suspect, in my opinion, was the double grenade punt at the end, right before he gets pulled out.
Right.
And they also skipped that 5-hour wait too. They didn't show anything about that. Him crawling.
Oh yeah. They dispensed with that, definitely.
I can understand,
and I understand the decision artistically, because how are you really supposed to depict that without creating kind of a big crater in the narrative?
I'm going to adjust your mic a little bit. You went to clicking. Speak to me.
Yes, sir. I will speak to you whenever, and however much you like. How is it now?
A little better. All right. Sometimes these things, they just don't work for us. We work for them. Okay. So
it's true.
We get to the end of the movie. My man gets down the hill. What was it? The 77th or the 177th?
77th.
The 77th is sitting at the bottom of the hill. Repeatedly, they have been frightened by people who just appear at the bottom of this cliff. They're just there. They're conscious, and when people start getting drugged down off the mountain, they're like, well, how did you get down? Doss is up there taking people down. What do you mean Doss is up there?
Yeah, there's some motherfucker up there with a rope dropping people down.
Carrying a Bible. That's all he's got.
Mm-hmm.
No grenades. He doesn't even have a whip. Nothing.
And he ain't going back up there until he is done praying.
He has a penknife, and he's really dangerous.
Well, and I think it's one of those things you could almost classify as so narratively convenient that it almost has to be made up, but it's not. And that's the moment when he has spent his whole life and the whole movie saying, absolutely not. I refuse to touch a gun. I will not lay my hands on a weapon. I will do every single other thing in this army except lay my hands on a gun. until it's time to rescue the wounded Vince Vaughn. And then he picks up a rifle and uses it to wrap around a blanket and create an improvised litter. And but you know, what a wonderful way of making a hypocrite out of your lead character.
Yeah,
just beautiful.
The thing to me was the look on Vince Vaughn's face when he picks up that rifle and his head almost screws off. It goes so far sideways. He's like, what are you going to do with that?
I know, because for a second he's not sure. He's like, why is Desmond picking up a gun?
And Vince Vaughn's response is to reload the P90 or whatever it was he had. It was like an MP8 or something. He had a weird one.
It was some. I wasn't sure what weapon that was either. It was a weird little machine gun, like with a big long magazine on it.
Yeah, but it's like an MP38 or something stolen from an earlier campaign or something.
But yeah, man, Desmond is dragging him to the edge of the cliff, and Vince Vaughn is just mowing down motherfuckers.
Grenades are falling right behind him, but he's getting far enough away from them that they blow up and hurt their Japanese instead of him. And when he gets there, he kicks Vince Vaughn off, basically, you know, just drop kicks his ass.
Yeah, he just throws his ass, basically.
He's just like, good luck, bitch. Hope you can fly.
Yeah. No soft landing for you. That rope's going to jerk a little bit.
This is going to smart. Do you remember all those nights when they were working me over and you knew about it? I want you to think about that shit on your way down.
But back to the point you were making a minute ago, consider that normally in a movie you have to embellish the truth in order to make it compelling. In this story, you had to leave things out, and everything you left in was still totally true. I mean, that's how inspiring and awesome and incredible that the Desmond Doss story is.
The only other story, which there's actually a few that if you read them, you'll be like, did that shit really happen? And it's 1919. If you go watch that movie, it includes several exceptions, or is it 1917?
1917.
1917. There are several 20-minute long cuts in that movie where they literally filmed this man doing these things up until they reach a point of like obscene change to such an extent that they have to cut it. Like when the airplane crashes in that movie.
Yeah, I really love that movie.
Yeah. It's an amazing movie. It seems boring to the modern audience because it seems like there's not a lot going on. But the thing you have to keep in mind is, and it would help to know what else is happening in that area at that time. Because if you don't understand that this man ran through part of the battlefield on one side of the line, and then the line passed him, and he just kept going. And then the line passed him again, and he didn't realize it. Then he gets knocked out and wakes up behind enemy lines again and just goes, well, shit, I'm just going to jump in the river and follow the bodies downstream. I'm sure I'll find a way out eventually.
I think the thing that picture does best is the depiction of, I think no other movie has gotten as close to depicting no man's land in that war as it probably actually was.
You can almost smell it. That movie is gritty.
Or you stick your hand somewhere and it might go through a dead horse or a dead man.
The thing that gets me, if you watch real close, you'll see the other actors that you come across, and even the actor that's the primary character in 1917. When he looks at the camera occasionally, usually in war movies, you come across a position where he's dirty, he's filthy, but his teeth are brilliant white, right?
Right.
Freshly brushed. Nope, not in this movie. Homie's walking around with a piece of dead horse hanging out his mouth going.
See, there you go. And sometimes it's little touches of realism like that make all the difference, isn't it?
Man, and it's so good. Like I said, if you know what's going on, if you've ever read that account, you realize there was a straight up gunfight that was completely cut out because it was 8-on-1 and he had 8 bullets. He picked up a gun that he had hit a soldier in the back of the head. Homie goes down, he snatches up his gun and realizes that the full clip is on the ground. He's got the clip that's almost empty, but there's 8 guys in front of him. He pops the clip in, pop, 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 kills all 8 of them, and then beats the guy to death with the butt of the gun because he couldn't find the clip he had dropped. And then stands there for a minute and goes, okay, so I'm still alive. I've got to deliver the information. And starts running again. He just drops the gun because it's useless here. If he pulls
and
the
that's
trigger,
the type of picture I think where you kind of have to give it your undivided attention when you watch it in order to appreciate it on its own terms. It's not the kind of picture you can watch just in the background as you're checking your texts and emails or whatever. But if you give it your undivided attention, it's just about as engrossing as a movie narrative can get when there's hardly any dialogue being spoken.
and the lack of dialogue, which would cripple most movies, in 1917, it actually enhances the suspense. You know.
Yes, and Dunkirk does the same thing. I would submit in a similarly effective way.
The Spitfire pilot, that whole scene where
yep.
you know, his whole squadron turns to goes back, and he goes, "Well, I've got 8 pounds more fuel than you have. Y'all go ahead." And he turns back, and knowing there's no chance he's coming out of this alive. It's 2 wingmen follow him for a minute, and then they are given direct orders: "You must return." He's like,
and one of the guys that we follow for almost the whole first act of the picture, we don't even know he's French until they're in the boat hiding from the snipers, because they haven't said anything to each other, and we don't even think about the fact that they haven't said anything to each other, and that's how effective the filmmaking is.
So you show, do not tell. That's something that
exactly. That is an absolute prototype textbook example of show, do not tell. When you are showing so well that the audience doesn't even notice that nothing is being said, that is sublime filmmaking.
All right, I'm going to make a comparison here, and you can feel free to just like boo-hoo the shit out of it.
Fire away.
When I'm watching Dunkirk, or 1917 for that matter, I'm constantly getting these weird flashbacks of a movie from the early 80s called Quest for Fire.
Oh, I know that picture.
It is an excellent film. It has dialogue, but it's in languages that never existed.
I remember seeing that picture in the theater as a very small kid.
Oh wow, Ron Perlman. It has Tree. What's her name? Tommy Chong's daughter. It has
Rae Dawn Chong.
Rae Dawn Chong. That's right.
Yeah.
Has there's a double handful of people who later became big stars in that film that are so made up you might not recognize them.
Yeah, that is a real blast from the past. I kind of want to watch that thing now. I may have not even seen it as an adult.
I got to see Iceman in theaters. It was one of the very, very earliest films. I saw Return of the Jedi in theaters when I was very, very young.
My earliest memory in life is seeing the first Star Wars movie in the theater. Literally.
Right.
Yep.
I didn't make it to that one, but I did make it to Return of the Jedi.
And I was 3 years old when the first movie came out, and I remember so vividly. I wasn't quite sure yet what the difference was between a movie and a stage play. So I kind of thought afterward I was going to get to go up and meet Luke Skywalker, and I wound up crying all the way home when I didn't get to meet him.
But when I went to see Iceman in theaters, there was a very strange interaction in the theaters with this. A lot of people seem to take Iceman as a comedy. And if you remember back, that movie's not exactly funny. There are a few funny points where you have a juxtaposition of a fish out of water type situation, but it's no Encino Man.
It is definitely no Encino Man.
So when people are sitting around laughing at that movie, it just went right over my head until I went back and watched Iceman as an adult. Flight of the Intruder was good. Did you?
Oh, that's right. Danny Glover was in that movie. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on Wikipedia.
Screw you and the horse you rode in on. Go ahead. Tell me about it.
1984, Universal Pictures, directed by a guy I've never heard of. I think I do remember seeing this one in the theater too when I was young. Anthropologist Stanley Shepard is brought to an Arctic base when explorers discover the body of a prehistoric man who has been frozen for 40,000 years.
40,000. I think we're on the short end of that stretch, bro.
Yeah, I think so, dude.
Yeah. There's some evidence nowadays that we have that the Neanderthals may have survived well at up to possibly 28,000 years ago. There's a few tidbits in the Siberian tundra that suggest a much shorter time period, but most people don't buy those. They think that those are tools that were used by created by Neanderthals and used by modern humans later, found and utilized.
I think there was probably a longer period of coexistence than we tend to think. And then, as you mentioned, I think that's slowly being ascertained as more of the archaeological record becomes accessible and available.
At some point, you and I are going to have to go over the Saruti Mammoth site and the different findings in that place. 130,000-year-old supposed mammoth killing in North America.
I need to give a shout out to John Danicola right now because he brought up the name of Audie Murphy, and it just so happens that this week was also the 80th anniversary of Audie Murphy's Medal of Honor action. So I want to read that citation too.
Go ahead. Do that thing.
Give me 1 second.
Yep. And just so we don't overrun too hard, I've got your song queued up over here in the backstage, and it is 5 minutes and 30 seconds. So keep that in mind.
5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Well, 38, but who's counting?
All right, almost got it. 1 moment.
That's what she said. Sorry. I'm not sure what to do with myself sometimes.
Yeah, we all have that problem.
Yeah, no one knows what to do with me. I get it.
Okay, I'm ready. Y'all ready?
All right, 2 seconds. Go.
Second Lieutenant Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Second Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to prepared positions in the woods, while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. Second Lieutenant Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, Second Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its 50 caliber machine gun against the enemy. He was alone and exposed to German fire from 3 sides, but his deadly fire killed dozens of Germans and caused their infantry attack to waver. The enemy tanks, losing infantry support, began to fall back. For an hour, the Germans tried every available weapon to eliminate Second Lieutenant Murphy, but he continued to hold his position and wiped out a squad which was trying to creep up unnoticed on his right flank. Germans reached as close to 10 yards only to be mowed down by his fire. He received a leg wound, but ignored it and continued the single-handed fight until his ammunition was exhausted. He then made his way to his company, refused medical attention, and organized the company in a counterattack which forced the Germans to withdraw. His directing of artillery fire wiped out many of the enemy. He killed or wounded about 50. Second Lieutenant Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction and enabled it to hold the woods, which had been the enemy's objective. End quote.
Magnificent.
Audie Murphy, ladies and gentlemen, American hero.
All right, bud. We got 1 minute, actually 30 seconds, and then we're gonna hit the song for the outro. We're gonna use it if possible, if it works. I'm having a little bit of a connectivity issue, but we're gonna give it a shot.
What can we do that takes 90 seconds?
We can sit here and talk like this and then go, and we're there.
Yeah, and then 90 seconds might go by before you know it, huh?
Exactly.
So where do we have to get to the 125 mark?
Just tell everybody bye, and I'm going to hit the music and let it roll. So you tell them
Yeah,
you love.
I'll talk us out, and then you do your thing.
Fantastic.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for joining us here on the Blast 3D. We sure do enjoy it every time we're all able to get together like this. We'll see you next week, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. We hope you have a pleasant week and a very edifying tomorrow and a generally agreeable immediate future until next we meet. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. Usual crowd stumbles in. There's an old man named Joe sitting next to me, sniffing my hair and crawling my skin. He says I don't have much of a memory. It just sort of comes and it goes. I could swear that I once was a billionaire, but my son put it all up his nose. Oh, la 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 da di da, la la da di da da. Sing us a song, you could ever, man. Sing us a song tonight, 'cause we feel like a zombie apocalypse, and you're the deadest man in sight. Now Cammy the cackler's a friend of mine. She gets all her drinks for free. She enjoys a good poke and a few lines of coke, and there's calluses all on her knees. She says, Cap, I believe this is killing me, as the smile ran away from her face. I just realized I don't have no skills at all except for my gender and race. Oh, la 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 di da, la la da di da da da. Now Dick is a public health admiral who ran right the fuck out on his wife. He's dressed up like a lady who serves in the Navy, 'cause Dick lives the cross-dressing life. And these people are so bad at politics. Their strategists all must be stoned. Yes, they're sharing a drink of stupidity, and they're playing the rusty trombone. Sing us the song, you could ever, man. Sing us a song tonight, 'cause we feel like a zombie apocalypse, and you're the deadest man in sight. It's a pretty light crowd for a Saturday. And Jean-Pierre shoots me a smile, 'cause she knows that it's me who won't say KJP, Baghdad buckwheat is much more my style. And the White House, it just looks ridiculous. They've got rainbow flags out for the queers, and they frolic along up and down the South Lawn. It's a fake tit convention in here. Oh, la 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 da di da. La la da di da da da. Sing us a song you could ever mend. Sing us a song tonight, 'cause we feel like a zombie apocalypse, and you're the deadest man in sight.
Tactical nuke incoming!